Journaling is a great way to get in touch with the present moment. You can track the progress of your goals, organize your life, and document it so you can make reviews of that chapter of your life. But if you don't actually know what you're looking for while journaling, it doesn't matter how much you journal, you're not going to be able to extract all the benefits and grow to the fullest of your potential. That's a problem that I had, and that is why I created the F.A.T.E Model. When I created this system, my goal was to have a very simple and easy access to the things that were happening in my life that were able to provide meaningful information for my growth. That is why the F that stands for feelings, we have the A that stands for actions, we have the T that stands for thoughts, and we have the E that stands for experiences. Each of these letters has a symbol related to it, so you can have more understanding symbolically of what they are doing. For the feelings, what we have is the astrological symbol for the moon. In astrology, the moon speaks about feelings in your world and everything that is going inside us emotionally. Now, for actions, what we have is simply a dot, a point, implying that it is a concentrating point of focus and thus of action. For the T of thought, what we have is a triangle with a line, a very widely known symbol for error. And error represents not just in astrology but in different spiritual areas the idea of communication and thoughts. And for experiences, we have another astrological symbol, which is a circle with a point in the middle. The idea of the circle implies that everything that we experience, that it is within our reach of experience, comes from mainly what we do and who we are, represented by the point. And you can also understand the symbol as this outer circle represents the soul, and down here at the point is that focal point where the soul goes down in order to experience this human experience in the material world. Something that I strongly believe is that if you truly want to be able to do something, you need to understand the why behind it so you can know how to do it. And that is what I'm going to explain to you right now. The spiritual mechanism and the way of thinking about this that's behind the F.A.T.E model. It is something that comes from the understanding of how we experience physical reality. And for this, there is a hierarchy of the things that are more primal, more spiritually profound than the others. And that sequence goes as follows. The experience is the deepest layer of everything that we have. From here, we go to the feelings, then we go to the thoughts, and finally, we go to the actions. When we are talking about the experiences, what we are actually thinking is about the beliefs that we have and the systems of beliefs that we have, which can be positive, can be negative. What happens is that from the soul level, imagine that this is the circle, we are focusing down into one point, and the rest of the soul, it is giving us information. And at the same time, we are giving information back to the soul. And what we are giving back from this center, this focal point, which we know as the human mind or the ego, it is based on a communication that it is happening not through words but through vibration, through how we are using our energy in the frequency. So when you're giving back this information to the soul through your frequency, the way that you're using your energy, the soul is going to provide you with experiences that are going to help you move forward in the things, the topic that is relevant in your life for you to experience. So when you have a belief system, you are saying to yourself and you're guiding your energy to have a specific experience. The communication that you have from your soul, it is going to go towards your feelings and what you're going to actually feel as a response is not the words, because the soul doesn't communicate with words. It communicates through energy and frequency. And when your body receives that energy, you're going to have feelings. That is why this is the second layer that we have. Through the way that you feel, what you are going to have is going to be a thought, a specific idea that goes hand in hand and that corresponds to the frequency of that feeling and the elements in physical reality that are a representation of that feeling. In other words, if you are feeling sad because something happened in your life and you're like just feeling really sad, one thing that probably you're going to do is to think about negative scenarios where the feeling that you already have is going to become stronger, is going to increase. And the more you think about it, the more you will start to go into a spiral of negative scenarios in your mind, or just remembering that negative situation that happened negative because it disconnects you, it separates you from something that you prefer. And you continue thinking about it. Why? Because what you have to do is not to control your thoughts, is to understand your feelings. And what you're going to do, which is the final layer, it is you're going to start acting in what you believe is better for you, what you believe is going to benefit you the most. And as you can see, what we have here is kind of a spiral that comes from the experiences, feelings, thoughts, and finally we get into the actions. When you take an action, you're doing something very specific. And since we are talking about the idea of an experience in physical reality, the language of physical reality has to be physical. It's something that you have to do physically in the world, because that is how you ultimately will give that feedback to the soul, so it can continue giving you this experience of being here as a human on earth. And a very important part here is understanding how the positive and the negative tools of reality actually work. They are not exactly positive or negative in the way that you're probably thinking about it, because in this, we are not giving a judgment of something is good or bad. Positive, it is everything and anything that you use to connect. Negative, it is anything and everything that you use in a way to disconnect, to separate. And when you have the positive and the negative, there is always that middle point, and that middle point is neutrality. And the neutral point is a point of balance that allows you to be there, as we often say, in the center. And when you are centered, you have the ability to connect back to the positive. So when there is a negative experience, you can see it, you can analyze it, you can understand it and say, I have a negative experience right here, right now. So that means that there is a belief or a belief system that I have that is working in a negative way. In other words, I am experiencing something that I don't prefer. You're not going to call that bad. You're not going to call that with an energy, a frequency of pain, of struggle, of fear, because that is going to promote this creation of more negative experiences. And something that you can do, which is not necessarily, you can talk about a new element here in the F.A.T.E model, which is the S, that stands for state of being. The idea of the state of being, it is if you're experiencing something in a positive way, in a negative way, or in a neutral way. This is going to allow you to see more in detail what are the different experiences that you're having, or the thoughts, actions, feelings that are happening in your life, so you can trace back to what must you be believing is true about you, about the situation, and about the things that are happening in your life in that moment. And the symbol that you can use is very similar to what we have here. You're going to put a circle in the middle, and you're going to create different ones, because it is you with the energy that you're sharing, that you're giving back, which is going to create that new experience in the future. And when there is an experience happening and you choose to be in a positive state of being sane, this experience that I'm having, that I'm experiencing, that is right here, right now, present in my life, I don't know, because many times it's just the way that it is. I, me, the human mind, the ego, I don't know what is going to happen with this situation. I don't, most of the time, most likely than not. I don't actually know why it's happening. I just know that. I just know that it is happening right now. So let me give you an example of something that actually happened to me not long ago. So what I like to do is I like to go with the idea of just the name. So fate. In other words, first we're going to start with the feelings. The symbol that we have here is the symbol of the moon. So the question that I have here mainly is, how am I feeling? How am I honestly feeling? In that moment, I had gone to the bank and I had to pay something. I had my card, but it did not go through. So when it didn't go through, what I felt was, for starters, I felt fear. I also felt stress and I felt very nervous because that was the last day that I had to pay and it just was not going through. The payment was just not going through. And underneath all of this, I also felt that there was some sort of adrenaline going through my body because I started to sweat. So when I started journaling, I said, okay, this is what I was feeling. I was feeling fearful, I was feeling stressed, nervous, and I had a lot of adrenaline. As I know, and that is why this is so helpful, that the moon in astrology speaks just about feelings, but it also talks about the idea of our inner child. I started to think about what were the things that as a kid I was taught to do or that I learned from my environment, from my schools, my teachers, my family, that were the appropriate things to do. And one of those things that I did and that I discovered myself doing again in that moment was the point or representation, the ego, was that I started to one sweat, and another one was to not move, to just quote unquote like to be still and pay a lot of attention to what other people around me were doing because I was trying to get an answer. That's one part of it. But I know that this idea of being still came from the fear that I had. And the idea that came to my mind in that moment when I was like journaling, which is the next part, which is the thought. The thought that I was having in that moment was that there has to be a mistake because I knew that I was doing like things correctly. Maybe the machine wasn't working or something. But I had the thought of things are not going to turn out to be okay. And another one, which was what many people can go to, is I'm in trouble. But at the same time, as I was doing all of this, what I did, which is the new element, if you would like to add it, I usually prefer to add it, which is the idea of the state of being represented by an S. That was the idea of breathe. And that was helping me to remain in a positive state of being. So say, okay, this is happening. Yes, I recognize that this is what I'm feeling. This is what it's running right now in my body as energy, as chemicals, and breathing is going to help me go through that. I had the thoughts. I just listened to the thoughts, and what I actually ended up doing was what I thought was the best thing to do, which was to ask for help and see what was going on. So the experience that I ended up having was not pleasurable, but something that was very insightful on my beliefs. In this idea of the experience, I started to go like a little bit around this idea of what I was feeling, what I did, what I was thinking at the moment, as a way to understanding what was that point of view that I had or what was that experience when I was a kid that made me have that reaction, that made me feel that way, think that way, and that was still in me. And what I discovered was that when I was very young, I had fear of authorities, and these mainly came from school because I was very scared of teachers. I was very scared and fearful of being wrong. And what I learned to do to just get by was to pay a lot of attention to what they wanted me to do. Like there was an exercise, I didn't do it properly, and I got grounded or something, like scolded, whatever. And I said, okay, that's what the person wants. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I didn't remember back then, the moment when that happened, I did not remember. But the more I kept on writing, going more in detail in the things that I did, how was my state of being, what I did to remain open to seeing the opportunities to fix it, I came to this conclusion. I learned to be fearful about authorities and to be fearful around authorities. And many things inside of me just clicked. They they became clear and more clear as I continued doing this exercise that day of what's actually behind and how that connects not just with this simple idea of being fearful of authorities, which I think that when we're kids, it's something that we usually go through and we experience, especially with hard teachers, but how that also relates to other experiences in other areas of my life that I had absolutely no clue that they were related in that way. That when, to say an example, that when I am teaching, I'm an English teacher, that when I'm teaching people how to learn English, how to speak English, because I teach to non natives English speakers, I see that they start to show these fearful signs of, am I exposed? Am I wrong? Like, not like what I did was wrong, like what I said was wrong. More like, I am a mistake. I'm able to spot it, I'm able to see it and go like, it's fine. Don't worry. You need to make a mistake in order for you to learn. Embrace it. Coming back here, if you're going into a negative state of being that you don't prefer, okay, breathe, recognize that this is something that you don't prefer, but keep it neutral. You need to learn. That's how you're going to learn. We're in a safe space. It's fine. You're going to do better next time. And that has been one of the greatest things that I have seen happening, not just through the F.A.T.E model, before I was able to come up with the idea of the F.A.T.E model, because it was something that I would just continue to experience, to think and reflect on in many different ways. And when I finally got to this model, it became so much clearer how I can actually do it and be more specific and intentional with what I write and how I write. And as I am writing and I am going through the different elements of the F.A.T.E model, as I know what I'm looking for, and I know that I can just go back, I'm becoming more present in the here and the now. And as I become more present in the here and the now, I am more able to just be like an open canvas where all the feelings, the thoughts, remembering the actions that I did, just combine. And I get in touch with myself to actually go more in this inner world and understand more of what's going on inside. And things just make so much more sense, so much faster. And I really love that. I really love that. And in one area of my life that truly helped me doing all of this work of understanding more how reality works and understanding myself more was in stopping lonely, in actually learning how to connect with people, how to share myself with the world so they can actually connect with me. If you have been lonely, then you know how complicated, sometimes how devastating loneliness can feel. And if you stay in a positive state of being, you're going to find a way to actually use loneliness to connect. So if you would like to do the same and understand loneliness from a very different perspective, so you can stop living a lonely life, watch this video right here.